In the Footsteps of Crazy Horse, Chapter 3, The Oregon Trail. It was windy and cloudy. They drove through the small town of Guernsey, and late in the afternoon they stopped along the highway. Crossing the fence, Jimmy followed his grandpa to the top of the hill. They sat down among some bristly green soap plants. Grandpa Niles pointed at the river, at the valley below. "That is called the North Platte River," he said. "Our people call it the Shell River. Now, if you look carefully, you can see some deep ruts just this side of the river." "Yeah," Jimmy said, "I see them. Looks like some big trucks got stuck in the mud." Grandpa Niles chuckled. "Well, guess what? Those are ruts, those tracks. They are over 150 years old." Jimmy was astonished. "For reals?" "For reals." "Wow, who made them?" "Wagons, thousands of them." Jimmy let out a whistle. "Thousands? Ever heard of the Oregon Trail?" "Yeah, we studied it in school." "Before it was called the Oregon Trail," Grandpa Niles explained, "it was known by the Lakota and other tribes as the Shell River Road. And before that, it was a trail used by animals like buffalo. It's an old trail." He paused for a moment. "So, do you know why we're here?" "Crazy Horse was here?" "You got it. He was still light hair when he first saw the wagons on the trail. Hundreds, thousands of them." Jimmy stared at the deep ruts. He knew about the trails. Lots of animals or people or cars traveling made the trails. They wore out the grass and made marks in the ground. How many wagons made those deep marks, he wondered. He could not imagine what hundreds and thousands of wagons looked like. "Imagine," said Grandpa Niles, "if one day you suddenly saw hundreds of flying saucers in the sky. What would you think? How would you feel?" "I'd be scared," admitted Jimmy, "and I'd wonder who was in them. Flying saucers? I mean," Grandpa Niles smiled, "I bet that's exactly what Lighthair thought back in about, 1852. The way it was, the summer of 1852. A slow and lazy breeze floated through the grasses. It was a hot summer afternoon. From the top of a hill, young Lighthair looked to the west, and from the front of the line of the covered wagons went way out of sight far over the hill. He looked east. Wagons at the back of the line were just coming over the horizon. A few riders were on either sides of the wagons. Some people walked, but no one seemed to be in a hurry. Lighthair was careful to stay down behind the grasses. Besides him was Little Hawk, his uncle, who was just astonished at the sight of the endless wagons. One after another, pulled by oxen. Since warriors always carried their weapons, Uncle Little Hawk had his black powder percussion rifle with him. His bow and arrows were tied on his horse. "Are they people?" Lighthair whispered. "I think so," Uncle Little Hawk replied, "but not like us. Their skin is pale, and many of the men have beards. Their clothing is different." "Where are they going?" the boy wondered. "Somewhere to the west. They have been doing this for 4 or 5 summers now, but I don't remember seeing this many." Lighthair and his uncle watched in silence. They had seen wagons before. The Long Knives at Fort Laramie used them. Wagons hauled soldiers and other people. They also carried food, flat wood, guns and powder, tools and clothing, and even water. All the things that white people needed and used. But never had the Lakota seen so many at once. Wagons were end to end from one horizon to the other, and even more people with them. Lighthair did not know what to think. In a way, he was scared, and he wondered if his uncle was, or if his father, Crazy Horse, was. "As long as they keep going," Little Hawk said, "that will be good. We don't want these people staying here on our lands. They leave their trash behind and scare away the buffalo. The wagon wheels leave marks, and they scar our land." Jimmy looked at the empty land along the river. Some cattle grazed on the other side, and a few antelope could be seen. "How many wagons went through here?" he asked his grandpa. "Hard to know, but history says that 350,000 people traveled on the Oregon Trail." Jimmy was astonished. 350,000? Wow, that's a lot of counting. For sure. They started from the state of Missouri, went by here, and ended up in California or Oregon. They did that for 20 years. "That's older than me," Jimmy declared. "What happened to them all?" "Well, that's a problem," Grandpa Niles said, with a sigh. "Some of them decided to stay. Later, more came to stay. They farmed and raised cattle and sheep. They forced our people off our own lands. Did our people try to stop them? Yes, they did. There were battles. When little Light Hair became Crazy Horse, he fought in many of them. Fort Laramie. Fort Laramie National Historic Site was a group of old buildings. They stood around a yard that seemed very large to Jimmy. People were walking around and looking in the buildings. Grandpa Niles drove up to the parking lot and stopped. Remember the ruts back there along the river? Yeah, Jimmy replied. Well, that trail came to this place, and then went farther west. This place is Fort Laramie. It's been here for a long time. Jimmy looked around. There was a wagon beside one of the old buildings. Near another wagon stood a group of men in blue uniforms. Are those long knives? Jimmy wanted to know. In a way, Grandpa Niles answered. They are reenactors. They come here and they play the part of soldiers. They talk to the tourists. Where are the Indians? Jimmy asked. Good question. Come on, let's look around. Okay, so Crazy Horse was here? Yeah, he sure was. He was here as Light Hair and as Crazy Horse. The way it was, September 1851. Lighthair could not believe the number of people. He could stand in one place, turn in a circle, and there were people, lodges, and horses everywhere he looked. They were camped along Horse Creek, a day's ride east of Fort Laramie, the Long Knife's outpost. Where did they come from? He asked. And are they afraid of her, one of his mothers? All over, she replied as she sliced wild turnips into an iron kettle. From the south, west, north, and east. Why are they here? Because white peace talkers invited them and us to come, she replied. I heard some people talking, but I couldn't understand them, Lighthair told her. Yes, many different people means different languages, she said. They are our friends in the Arapaho and in the Cheyenne, and our enemies too, the Crow. And then the Assiniboine, Mandan, Hidasta, and Araka, our relatives, the Dakota and the Nakota, are here too. Why? They are afraid of her, chuckled, because the white people in the wagons on the Shell River Road, they're afraid we might attack them. So peace talkers want us to promise to leave them alone. Then maybe they should just stay away, Lighthair said. His mother laughed. That's what most of the people here think. Now go find your brother, and the two of you stay close to our lodge. I don't want you wandering away. It's easy to get lost. Lighthair found his little brother, Whirlwind. He was called that because he was always on the move, first going in one direction and then another. Come here, he said to the younger boy. Mother wants to stay close. Let's go look at the horses, begged Whirlwind. See over there? They have little black spots all over them. All right, but just for a little while, Little Hare said, giving in. They hurried through the groups of people, while avoiding the barking dogs. Lighthair took his little brother by the hand. He had never seen so many people in one place. Men stood in groups, together talking. Older boys rode away on the horses. Women called out for their children. Others tended to kettles hanging over cooking fires. Smaller children played by the lodges, and everywhere he looked it seemed there were more horses than people. He suddenly felt very small. That was the council on Horse Creek, said Grandpa Niles, east of here. History calls it Fort Laramie Treaty Council of 1851. The people came because they were curious about what white peace talkers wanted, and they were told all of the Indians were not to bother the people in the wagons on the Oregon Trail. Also because the whites offered gifts. Being asked not to bother these people seemed kind of silly because it was the wagon people who always started the trouble. Some of them would shoot at Indians, and the tribes signed the treaty, but after Lighthair became Crazy Horse, he was here again. Other than that, he stayed away. He didn't like this place. Well, why did he come back? Jimmy wondered. Horses, replied Grandpa Niles. He led a raid. Crazy Horse and several other Lakota warriors swept through here like a sudden wind, and they took the Long Knives' horses. The Long Knives chased them, but they couldn't catch them. Grandpa Niles turned and pointed west beyond a two-story building. They came from that direction, and then he pointed towards the other side of the large open space. Most of the Long Knives' horses were picketed there. Pawnee scout horses, too. Pawnee? Jimmy asked. The Long Knives, the Long Knives used them a lot as scouts against other Indians. Did they take all of the horses from there? No, I don't think so. A lot of them, though. Jimmy looked around, imagining Lakota warriors on horseback. He could see them racing across the open area. He could hear them, a drum-like pounding of the hooves. Why did they do that? He asked his grandfather. Grandpa Niles smiled. Well, because they could, and because Crazy Horse wanted to annoy the Long Knives. Jimmy smiled broadly. I think he did that. Grandpa Niles was smiling as well. Yeah, he did, for sure. But there was an incident that happened near here when he was still Little Hair, something that caused the Long Knives to attack Little Thunder's village. You mean Light Hair helped the Yellow Woman? What happened? Grandpa Niles took on his storytelling face again. Yeah, it was. Let me tell you what happened. The way it was, 1854. Light Hair and his friend Slow were among the first to see the soldiers coming. The Long Knives were riding in wagons, sitting shoulder to shoulder. Behind the wagons, a team of horses pulled a strange-looking object. It looked like a thick, short log, but it was black. A warrior, who also saw the Long Knives, shouted a warning. Long Hair and Slow ran and hid in a choke-cherry thicket. They knew the Long Knives were coming because of that skinny cow. Several days earlier, a cow had wandered into the village, a cow from those whites called the Mormons. The cow had knocked over the meat racks and bumped into an old woman. A Minkanju had killed it. He had been visiting from Sankangwu village. The cow had been butchered and the meat given away to the old people. Then the white man had come, and he wanted his cow back. He had gone to the one in charge of the Long Knives at Fort Laramie and complained. A messenger came from the Long Knives fort to Sangyun village handyman Conquering Bear. The old man offered payment, several mules for the cow. Foolishly, the Mormon wanted his cow, not the mules. One mule was worth more than that skinny cow. Conquering Bear had done his best to avoid trouble. The next Long Knife headman insisted that the man who had killed the cow be put in jail. Conquering Bear refused, so the Long Knives had now come to take Mikanju. The soldiers jumped down from the wagons and formed a line, pointing their rifles towards the village. Conquering Bear and two other men bravely walked towards them. The old man spoke with the soldier in charge. The soldier spoke loudly and angrily. Meanwhile, Light Hair and Slow saw the warriors gathering in the village. Long Knives, the soldiers, were not to be trusted. Conquering Bear offered more mules for the cow. The soldiers' leader's name was Lieutenant John Granton, and he was angry. He demanded that the man who had killed the cow be brought to him. Conquering Bear refused again. When the old man saw there was no use in talking, he and his two men turned and walked away. The soldier leader shouted, and the soldier guns fired. The big black thing that looked like a log turned out to be a big gun. He was fired at the village. It boomed like thunder. Conquering Bear was one of the first to fall, severely wounded. The waiting warriors attacked, charging the long knives. Little Hair and Slow watched, too young to join in. Warrior guns crackled and boomed, and the men swung their clubs and thrust their lances. The soldiers seemed helpless because the warrior attack was swift. Many soldiers fell, and some ran away. Those fleeing were chased and cut down, except for one. He was sent back to the Long Knives fort. The soldier leader, Grattan, had been one of the first to fall. Light Hair and Slow watched some of the warriors ride towards the Long Knives fort. They heard later that the Long Knives would not come out to fight. The badly wounded Conquering Bear was taken to his lodge. There, Light Hair's father and other medicine men treated his wounds, but their efforts could not save the well-liked old man. When Conquering Bear died, a man walked through the village shouting the terrible news. Light Hair was very sad when he heard. Without thinking, he found his horse mounted and galloped away across the prairie. He was angry, and he understood now why many Lakota did not trust the white people. They were loud and quick to anger and eager to shoot their weapons at the Lakota. Lighthair rode aimlessly, his thoughts full, and sounds and images he and Slow had witnessed. Sounds of the long knives, rifles, and the big guns, images of the brief and furious battle and the soldiers falling. He found himself at the base of the hill, tying his horse to a plum tree. He climbed the hill and took shelter in the shade. Later, he took his horse to drink from the small creek nearby. Then he went back up the hill. He could not take his mind off the battle or off the man who had died. When the night came, he fell asleep. Lighthair had no food. The next morning he awoke hungry, his stomach growling, so he drank water. Very slowly the day passed. He sat in the shade and walked around the hill. He took his horse to water again. Evening gave way to night once more, and he slept. Sometime in the night the dreams came. It was a strange dream. A warrior on a horse rode across the lake. Mountains and storm clouds rose to the west. There was the sound of thunder, and a red-tailed hawk flew above the man and the horse. As the horse galloped, it changed colors, from black to blue, and from white and then red. Bullets and arrows flew at the man, but did not hit him. Then the horse and the rider reached the dry ground, and other men who looked like the rider rose out of the earth. They surrounded the horse and pulled the rider down. Lighthair could almost feel their hands pulling. Then he awoke. His father and another man were shaking him. "Wake up," they said. "What are you doing here, alone?" What happened then?" Jimmy asked. His grandfather had paused for several long moments. "They took him home, back to the village," Grandpa Niles said. "Lighthair's dad had scolded him for wandering off without telling anyone." "Who was the other man?" "High Backbone, but he was called Hump." His grandfather replied. "He was Lighthair's teacher. He taught him how to be a hunter and a warrior. The two of them were friends for life, until Hump was killed in a fight against some Shoshone. He was a strong man and a very good teacher." "What about the dream?" Jimmy asked. "Well, we all dream when we sleep. Sometimes the dreams don't mean anything. But Lighthair's dream had a very strong meaning. He didn't tell his father until months later. Then his dad and another medicine man told him what it meant." Jimmy was very curious. What did it mean? Grandpa Niles smiled and ruffled his grandson's hair. "I will tell you later," he said.